participants. Let me see. Don't follow participants.
It's not showing me the list though.
So,
It's on this side. Do you think I should be muted?
yeah, I want you mute right now. And
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We wanted to make sure that everyone was getting in okay and giving everyone a few extra minutes. So glad to have you tonight. This is going to be a great webinar. Very excited about it. And Mardi, I'll maybe turn the screen to you for a second.
You ready for me to do my screen share?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you. So again, welcome everyone. This is an exciting evening. It is part of our education series. And we're really excited about this topic and very grateful to Mardi for being here to help us learn more. I'm Michelle Frampton. I'm the Executive Director of BirchBark. I see that we have a lot of names in the audience tonight that we know and a lot of new names. So welcome. We're so glad you can join us and partake in this great information as well as learn more about our amazing organization. We're very grateful for that. BirchBark Foundation is unique in nature. We serve a niche in our community, and it's a gap that isn't always looked at. And our mission is about protecting and honoring the human-animal bond. We have 3 programs in order to do that. We have our pet aid gifts that provide financial support to families with animals who have unaffordable but fixable veterinary crises. As we all know, animals are part of our families, and to come up against some of those very hefty veterinary bills and not be able to afford it is unthinkable. So again, we are about protecting and honoring our bond with our animals. So with our pet aid gift program, we do that. We also have our pet loss support counseling program, where we have 2 Zoom groups per month, as well as the ability to have one-on-one counseling with our team of counselors. It's open to the whole animal loving public. And again, we know how important our animals are to us. And when we lose them, it's some of the most deep and fracturing loss that we can experience. So we are here for support around that. And then, of course, tonight, we are all partaking in our education program, which is our 3rd program. And it's our goal to help all of us have the most informed and empowered experiences with our animals and for our animals, and be the best caretakers of our animals that we possibly can be. So again, we're grateful you're all here tonight. We're grateful to Mardi for putting together this really informative, exciting, beautiful presentation. And then I'd also like to thank our sponsor of tonight, Boehringer Ingelheim, who has been a dear friend of BirchBark and are truly an amazing company in the veterinary community. A lot of the medications and care that is out there for our animals all starts with BNI, and they are very philanthropic in nature and have been just true friends of BirchBark. So thank you. I want to take care of a few housekeeping things before I turn it over to Mardi. And I'm going to look at my list so I don't make sure I forget anything. We will have a question and answer session after Mardi's presentation. So she will be here. Please go ahead and put your questions into that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We are going to do our very best to try to answer all of your questions. If for some reason we can't get to them, Mardi has graciously said, we will send out emails, or she's going to provide some ways to contact her directly. Let's see. So some of the videos may be a little bit low in volume just on their own. So go ahead and use your own volume to turn up the volume when you hear the videos. If it's too low for you, use your own volume, and that should help. If you have any technical difficulties, go ahead and put something in the chat to BirchBark, and I'll be watching, and our team will be watching, and we can help you take care of that. There will be a recording available after tonight. So we will send that out to everyone within the week, and people who weren't able to join us tonight will receive that. The recording is in progress. And one last thing that I want to share is, with COVID being, I don't even know, we are going to go ahead and have our in-person annual event, which is Fall in Love with BirchBark, on September 22nd. There will be more promotion about that, but just want to say, save the date. It's going to be a beautiful evening filled with love and stories, and a way to celebrate the human-animal bond together. So I think that's it for my housekeeping. Without further ado, I want to introduce Mardi and say a huge thank you to her for being an impact in the community and in animals and families' lives. And we're very grateful that she's part of tonight with BirchBark.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. So I'm really happy to be here. And thank you, BirchBark, for inviting me, and to all of you for coming out tonight, both in support of BirchBark and also to learn more to benefit your animals and the animals you serve. Quick introduction, who am I? I'm Mardi Richmond, I'm a dog trainer. I know there's a lot of familiar names among the participants tonight, so a lot of you know who I am, but I think there are some people who are new to me, so maybe you don't. So I've been a dog trainer helping other people train their dogs for 22 years. I've been studying dog training for about 30 years. Teaching coming when called to dogs has been one of my specialty areas. It is a topic that is near and dear to my own heart, and it's such an important skill, and it's also really fun to train. So it's just all around just kind of a great thing to work on with your dogs. There's so much to know about coming when called that it's kind of a little too much to be able to get into a one evening webinar. So what I've decided to do with this is I'm gonna gloss over some areas, and other areas I'm going to go into a little more detail. And I've chosen the areas to go into more detail that I think are places where maybe you won't get this information at your regular dog training class. So hopefully you'll see what I mean as we head on. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that when it comes to teaching our dogs come, not all dogs are created equal. We all have seen those dogs on the beach or hiking or even in our neighborhoods where the dogs seem to come almost effortlessly to their person. They learn it quickly. They are very biddable. They want to follow their person. If the person even says it softly, the dog is right there. These are a very small percentage of our dogs. Most dogs, this is not how they are with coming when called. When I think about the dogs that are really good at coming, I think that it's maybe 5% of the dogs out there. That's a guess on my part, but you know, from my experience in teaching classes and lots of dogs over the last 20 years or so. There are some dogs, a very small number, but there are some that coming when called is really hard to get reliable. I've worked with a few of those. Most of the time we can nudge them in that direction, but there are a lot of reasons why sometimes it can't be as reliable. But for most dogs, getting a good recall is really a matter of putting in the time and some training. If you do not have a great recall on your dog, I just want to say that it's not a reflection of you or how much your dog loves you or respects you, or the fact that you're not being dominant enough and, you know, those kinds of things. It's really a reflection on normal dog variations and oftentimes on learning history. So how the dog has been trained and what they actually know. Can every dog be off-leash safe? No. The answer to that is unequivocally no. Not every dog can be off-leash safe in every environment. Most dogs can be off-leash safe in some environments. Many dogs can be off-leash safe in many environments, and there are a few that are not off-leash safe in most places, except, you know, your personal home or your own yard. The dogs that tend to not be off-leash safe are those that are easily overstimulated or overexcited. And I would say most puppies and adolescent dogs fall into this category. Most also outgrow this category, but if you've got a 7-month-old puppy, overexcitement is probably a pretty good bet. And the lack of recall when they are overexcited is also a pretty good bet. Some dogs have aggression issues. Some dogs have fear issues. I had a dog that would startle at certain things, noises and other things like that. And she was not really off-leash safe in a lot of environments because if she startled, she'd just start running. And that was a situation that we couldn't really train for. Dogs that have exceptionally high prey drive are also particularly challenging for recall, but most of those can be off leash in some environments. Some environments, we just have to be careful where we let them off. Let's see. I also wanted to mention that coming when called may not be your best way of dealing with other types of challenges. So these are things that come up all the time with my puppy people and people that I work with. So for example, if your puppy steals your socks, or like my little cute dog here, Shadow, with a bandana, calling them to you to take those socks away is probably not a great idea because they're going to learn real quick not to come when you call. If your dog is hesitant to come inside from the backyard because it ends their fun every time, again, I can talk about my own dog liking to be out there with the squirrels. And if I were to call her come every time she was chasing a squirrel out there, pretty soon she would start listening to my come. And we've worked on some different cues that I can use in that very special situation. A lot of times people also use come when they mean something else. So I was working with somebody today who was actually meaning to say heel to their dog. And instead, as they walked with their dog, they'd say come. And now that dog's going to be a little confused if sometimes it means come to me, in front of me, and stop there. And sometimes it means follow me. So that's the kind of thing I want you to think about when I say that come may not be your best way of dealing with all of your challenges. The other thing I wanted to mention is that off-leash success really isn't just about recall. And I bring this up because it really speaks to the relationship that you have with your dog and how connected you guys are out in the world. Coming when called is only one piece of it. There's lots of ways to get that off-leash connection with your dog. Some of them involve a lot of training, agility, doing send-outs like for obedience work, distance downs, sports like fly ball, off-leash scent training, scent work that you do off-leash. These are all ways that you can get a connection with your dog when they're off-leash, besides just with coming when called. But there's other things you can do that don't necessarily involve tons of training or even a big time commitment on your part. They're just about staying really connected with your dog. So, for example, one of the ways you can stay connected is to notice what your dog enjoys. This dog in the picture here is really getting a good sniff in. And if you pay attention to what your dog enjoys and maybe sharing that some with them. So I was working with a pup today, a really nice young dog, and we were talking about this very concept. And I just, as a way of demonstrating, the dog was sniffing an area and I went over and said, "Oh, what are you looking at right there?" And the dog looked at me and got super happy because I was just paying attention to him. And then I went over to another bush and I pointed to it and said, how are the smells over here? What do you think? And the dog came over and they sniffed, and then they got really excited again because I was there sharing it with them. My own dog likes to share sniff gopher holes. So we're always looking for the holes that have the freshest dirt and the live gophers in them so that she can stick her nose in and get a big whiff. Finding sticks together. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. So it doesn't have to be real formal, but sharing in things when your dog is off leash can be super helpful. And with that, on that note, I like to say, and please put your phone away. Be with your dog if you're out with your dog. And being a little bit consistent with your dog on boundaries. How far away is okay for them to get in certain situations. They can all learn this. They can learn that, you know, it's okay to go 30 feet away, but not to go 100 feet away. Okay, so we're going to talk a little more specifically now. This is going to be obvious, and I think all of you know this, but the role the environment plays in your dog's recall is huge. We need to, and in their off-leash fun in general, we need to make sure that your dog's safe from cars, from other animals, from water dangers. If your dog likes to swim in the ocean, for example, and it's a day where there are 12-foot waves, you probably don't want to let your dog off leash in that environment. If they're going to just go and leap into the ocean. Our dogs need to be safe for others. So, you know, if they can't yet respond to you, they don't even have to be aggressive or anything, but let's say you've got a sweet young thing that wants to go up and say hi to everybody and maybe still's just a little jumpy, and they go up to a small child because they love kids, and then they get a little jumpy and knock into the kid, and that can be, you know, an unsafe situation. And of course, it goes without saying that they have to be safe around wildlife and cats and things like that if they're going to be off leash in that kind of environment. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the human part of off-leash skills and of recall. And this first part is on the do's, things you need to do to make sure that your dog can come, is able to come, and enjoys their off-leash time. So the first one is use good judgment. Boy, I have to say that the biggest issue that I've seen come up with recall is when people have unrealistic expectations of their young dogs. You have to know what your particular dog can handle, and this is different for every dog. One dog may be able to handle the dog park and being around other dogs just fine, but may not be great out in the woods where there are deer. Another dog may be just the opposite, where they're fine going on long hikes, but boy, they really can't handle it. They get super overstimulated at dog beach. So you have to think about who is your dog. Not every dog will be comfortable or reliable in every environment. It's just a fact. You have to do systematic training. As the human end of the team, you really have to put in the time to teach your dog what coming when calls means and other off-leash skills as well. You have to learn what motivates your dog. So most of us would like a dog that we say come, and they come to us and we go, good dog, that's awesome. Give them a little pet and go on our way. And I will say that for most dogs, that is not going to be a big enough reinforcement to maintain a good recall. Most dogs, you're going to have to, you know, pump up the reinforcers, and you got to know what motivates your dog. So my current dog is highly motivated by toy play. So that's our big reinforcer for recall. My previous dog was highly reinforced by chicken. So she was a dog that we used a lot of food rewards for recall. Some dogs were going to be motivated by other things in life. So you gotta kind of pay attention to who your dog is. You want to always start the good stuff in life with come, and I cannot emphasize this enough. If you start the good things in your dog's life, the things they want with come, they are going to want to come to you. in most situations. So for example, if your dog loves going for walks, now this would not hold true for a dog that does not enjoy walks or is nervous when they go outside the front door. But let's say your dog loves going for walks. If you go, hey, Shadow, come, and you grab the leash and you hold it up and the dog comes running over and you snap on the leash and you go. That's a great way to use come, because you're starting the good stuff with come. I always recommend also like calling your dog to you, quick recalls from the end of your leash before you take the leash off for your dog to run at the beach or somewhere else in the park. So that's it. That's a really a biggie. One of the other things that is a must do for a dog to be have good off-leash reliability is that they need to have the opportunity for activity, for social connection, and for what's called species-specific behaviors. That means sniffing and exploring and generally being a dog. So if you have a dog, for example, that is never off leash, you don't have a backyard, you don't have any place that you feel like you can go, that dog is starved to run and play and stretch their legs. They probably won't be able to come to you, no matter how much training you do, until they get to have some of those needs met. And I'll talk a little bit about some ideas on that in a bit. Okay, so along with do's, what you should do are always some don'ts, the things that we want to be careful not to do. We always want to be careful not to put our dog in situations where they will learn, while they're still learning to come, well, they will learn that not coming is super rewarding. So for example, if I were to call my dog and she's out there with her best pal and she looks at me and she looks at her best pal and she looks back at me and then she goes, yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to go play with my good pal right now. She's learning in that moment that not coming is super rewarding, not listening to me in that moment. So we have to set them up for success. So what do? You know, if I called my dog, if I wanted to call my dog out of play and she wasn't fully trained yet on calling out of play, what I would do instead is to go up to her. I would go to where she is. I might ask for a sit or something else that's not as critical in our lives. And I might ask for a sit, tell her to stay, walk up, snap the leash on, and then take her out of play that way, rather than using my come. Now, later on, when she's super well trained, I would be able to use come again, or come in that type of situation when I had taught my dog how to do that. But until they're trained to that point, you want to be careful that they don't learn the wrong stuff when you call them. We want to make sure that we don't use come to end play or other fun times in general, or call our dogs to us to perform distasteful things like, you know, calling them to you because it's time for a bath. I have to say my dog hates baths, and if I called her before a bath, it would take about 3 baths for her to go, yeah, you're calling me right now? I don't think so. I'm going the other way, because she's going to want to avoid that bath. So instead, again, I go up. If it's bath time, I go up and I snap the leash on and I grab my treats and I go, okay, come on, we're going to go do a bath. And she goes, oh, okay, I guess I have to. And she comes along pretty agreeably. But I could really ruin my come if I called come to get her into the bathtub. I also want to say that a big don't is not to fall into what we call the bribe trap. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times folks, and I've done this myself, we call our dogs and they don't respond. So we get out the food after that we've called them and after they haven't responded, and we show it to them and we ask for come again. They're going to learn really quickly not to listen unless we have that food or toy or whatever we're using. And this is going to backfire when you need recall in the real world. In the initial stages of training, they can know what's coming, but after the initial stages, we always want to get the behavior first and then bring out that reinforcement. So we're using it as a reward rather than as a bribe. Super big difference there. Okay, the last thing I want to bring up on the human part of the equation for good recall and good off-leash skills. And this is, I'm sure everybody knows this and it's obvious, but you never want to act in a way other than that your dog is the greatest thing on earth when they come to you, no matter what they were doing just before they came. So for example, if my dog is rolling in a dead sea lion on the beach and I call her to me, at that moment, I'm not going to go, that was so bad. Oh my God, I can't believe you rolled in that thing. That's effectively punishing the recall. If I want to punish her for rolling in the sea lion, I'm going to go where she is and say, hey, get out of that sea lion. Don't do that. Rather than call her to me and tell her not to go into that dead sea lion. So I hope that makes sense. We have to really watch our body posture, our tone of voice, and make sure that we are working with our dogs. Okay, so we just had 3 slides and about 15 bullet points on the humans part in coming when called. And now we have 3 bullet points on the dog's part. So that kind of gives you a good idea of how important your role is in all of this. The dog's piece is that they have to understand what the behavior is, what is meant by coming when called, and what is expected. And this is through systematic training, pure and simple. When the dog is trained in a systematic way, they get this. They also have to understand what is off limits to them. And again, that's due to training and experience. And I'll give an example of that. I enjoy doing agility with my dog, and she seems to really enjoy it as well. And if we are at an agility trial and she is running in one ring and there's another dog running in the ring next to us, I need her to understand that that dog running is not really her business, and that ring of agility equipment isn't her business, and that the dog that's outside waiting their turn and playing a wild game of tug is really not her business either. Those things are off limits to her in that context. And that's something that just takes some systematic training as well. Our dogs also need to learn that we will always have their best interest at heart. And that comes from us being super trustworthy with our dogs and taking care of them and really protecting them out in the world. Okay. So now what I want to do is kind of go into some specifics about teaching coming when called. So the second half of this is going to be on actually teaching some skill building and teaching things. The first specific that I want to bring up is if you've got a recall that's a little less than stellar right now with your dog, and believe me, we've all been there. Let's say your dog is 50-50. You call your dog and about half the time they come to you and about half the time they blow you off. They just kind of ignore you. In that situation, we definitely want to start over. We want to use a new word. We want to retrain it from the very beginning. What about if your dog has about a 90% recall? They come most of the time, but there's just a few small areas where you could use a little more. That's the kind of situation where you're probably going to be able to get away with using the same recall word. So what's between the 50 and the 90? let's say you've got 60-40 or 70-30 or 80-20. How do you know whether you want to start with a new recall word? I would say if you've got about, 7 out of 10 times you call your dog and they come to you. And when they don't come to you, it's in very specific circumstances. So they're playing with their best pal and you call them and they don't come. And that's the only time they really don't listen to you. Then we can definitely work with that using the same recall word. But let's say your dog comes 7 out of 10 times, but those 3 times they don't come are unpredictable to you. You don't know whether they're going to come or not. It may be sometimes it's when they're playing with their dog friend. Another time it's when they found a good sniff on the ground. And another time it's because they see something in the distance that's caught their attention. If that's your 70-30, then you definitely want to start over and rebuild it up. We want to get a conditioned response with our recall. And if your dog has already learned that it's something that they get to weigh and balance what's in their best interest at that moment, then we want to start over and develop a conditioned response. And I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. For your dog to have good off-leash skills, they must have the ability to actually have some off-leash time. And I do want to say that I understand that this is really hard in our area. It's hard to find places that are safe for dogs that aren't yet fully trained. So some things to think about, you can go to, fenced areas, neighbors' backyards or a friend's backyard. I've got a friend with a great big backyard. Ask him if your dog could come over and play. Sniff spots. If you don't know what a sniff spot is, you can go look that up. I have one client that routinely takes her dogs to sniff spots for off-leash activity away from home. So you can find sometimes fenced parks, areas that are safe that way. So think about that. Your dogs really you want to carefully, but you have to allow them off-leash time before you'll get a good recall. Okay, I'm going to start here with going over a few specific training exercises. So I mentioned before that we want a conditioned response to our recall. What does that mean? What that means is that we want our dog to hear their word. You can use the word come, hear, front, the dog's name, hot dog, pup, pup, anything you want. But whatever your recall word is, we want them to hear that word and to react to it without thinking. So I wanted to give a quick example of what a conditioned response is for people. Something that is where we have been trained to such an extent that we can really do something without really having to think about it. So I like to use the example of learning to drive. Whenever you first learn to drive, you have to think about every step. You push your foot in on the gas, and then you want to come to a stop and you have to think, okay, take your foot off the gas, put it on the brake, push it in smoothly on the brake. These are really conscious things at first. After you've driven for just a little while and you get it, and there's a lot of reinforcement for getting it, because when you push your foot on the brake, the car stops. That's reinforcement for you. When you push your foot on the gas, it goes. That's the kind of reinforcement. So you're getting a reinforcement history that develops a conditioned response. Most of us who've driven for more than a few months, if we come up to a stoplight, it's green and it turns red, our foot automatically moves from the gas to the brake. We don't even think about it. We can be listening to the radio, looking at the bumper sticker on the car in front of us, assuming we saw the light change, talking to our passenger, We can do lots of other things because it has become an automatic response or a conditioned response. And that's what we want to get to with coming when called. So we start with conditioning the word. Super simple exercise. You start in a low distraction place. You start with steak or salmon or the best thing your dog ever gets. Food is really good to use for this. So maybe it's in your kitchen with your other dogs put away, or it's, you know, that kind of thing without other family members around. And then 10 times in a row, you're going to say, come, and give your dog that little piece of steak. Come, give a piece of steak. You're going to do that 10 times in a row, twice a day for about 10 days. It's that simple. When you do that, your dog's going to hear that word and they're going to have that kind of reaction that this little dog in the picture is having. They're going to go, woohoo, I love that word. And if your dog doesn't have that woohoo when they hear come, then you might want to start with a new word. We want that super positive feeling. The next slide is going to be a video that shows this. I like to give this exercise because most people don't get this in their dog training classes or from a dog training book or even videos. And yet it is probably the thing that I think gives the biggest bang in your recall training. It gives you the biggest leg up for real world recalls later on. And just a reminder that my sound quality on my videos is really bad. I don't have a mic, so I should get a mic, but I don't have one. So there's a lot of background noise and stuff, and you may have to turn the volume up on the video. So let's go to the next slide and you can watch this exercise.
Hey there, this is for conditioning the word come. Here's what you do. Say the word come. You do it 10 times in a row. Come. 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 The word comes first, then the treat. Come. 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 It's that simple.
And it really is just that simple. You'll know if it's working because your dog will be facing away from you and you'll say the word come and they just kind of whip their head around without even, without thinking about it. They just whip around. So you guys can practice that one super easily. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about the type of training most of us get in a class. So when you take a dog training class, we usually learn recall as an exercise that's about turning our head away from something interesting, running to us, and then stopping when they get there. And I'm going to talk about each of these things independently and tell you a little bit about what is expected of your dog with this. First, you're a dog. Whenever we call our dogs, they're always doing something else. They're always interested in something else. They're sniffing, they're playing, they're doing something. And we say, hey, Shadow, come. And they have to disengage from whatever they're doing. I use my dog's name for that disengagement. Some people just use their recall word for it, and either is fine. What I suggest with people is that you think about what is going to come out of your mouth in that moment. So I always know that my dog's name is going to come out first because that's just how I learned 40 years ago to teach recall. So it's kind of an automatic response for me to say it that way. So I'm going to train it that way. We want to train this separately from the running to you part or the stopping when they get to you part. This is probably the hardest piece of your dog's recall. In order to give you all the steps involved in doing this, I have about a 20-minute video on it, and I'm not going to show that tonight. But if you want to go to my website, you can find the video on the under resources, under handouts, on the name game. And you can watch that video and get step-by-steps on it. But the basics is your dog's looking away, you say their name, they whip their head around to you, and you reinforce them big time. And you do that enough times that they go, I love hearing my name. Really similar to the exercise that I showed you previously of I really love come, except we're starting with the dog facing away from us. Part 2 is running to you. Truthfully, this is the most impressive part of our recall when our dogs race to us, but it's also the easiest part to train. Most dogs love running, and if they are already disengaged from something, they generally like running to us, especially if we've rewarded it a whole bunch. Stopping when they get to you. Have you ever seen one of those dogs on the beach that run? The person calls and they whip around and they come racing back to him, and then they start doing circles around them, big donuts, and they stay just out of reach. I used to have a dog like that many years ago. And it's really embarrassing. So a really important piece of your recall training is also teaching them to stop when they get to you. They can sit when they get to you, they can stand, but we want to have them stop and pay attention to you. Some people do a collar touch when they come, and we want to have them come and stay with you until you release them with a release word like okay or free or something like that to go back out and play some more. Now, the important piece on this and why I'm bringing this up is, yes, you'll learn this in any training class or from any recall video, how to train your dog to come. But I want you to think about training each of these things independently. So we train the head turn. Then we train the running to us with calling our dog between two people or something like that. Then we train them to stop when they get to us. Then we put it all together. Why? Because each of these has to be reinforced for it to be strong. So we want that behavior to get super strong. And so you want to reinforce each separately and then put it together as a whole. And that whole is called a behavior chain. Now, I was just talking a second ago about that whiplash head turn that I use for the name game that I use to teach the whiplash head turn. Once your dog has that basic turn towards you when they hear their name or the word come, we want to start teaching our dog to do it with lots of different things. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to come out of, say, play with their pals or something else that they're doing. We start with a super simple exercise for this. And then later we build on it for them calling away from movement or social interactions or super interesting smells for those dogs that love to sniff. This exercise that I'm going to show, and I'm going to show you a video of this, looks ridiculously easy. And it's pretty easy to train, but it also has a really big impact on your dogs being able to do a come in the real world. So I think I'll go to that video and let you guys watch it.
So various things here, prompts to use when I'm first teaching my dog this. So I've got a boring towel. I've got a container with holes in it that I can put some food in. And I've got a slightly boring toy. I don't want you to try this exercise until you've got really proficient with the name game. Flip things. I'm going to be using food as a reward for this right now. You can also use toy and play as a reward. Put it down. Good. As you can see, she's picking up the towel. I don't care about that as long as she comes right back to me. Okay, next item. I put in a few of my treats in this container. This is our next item that we're going to go to. So after they're really good with boring things, do 5 or 6 boring things. Okay, so now I'm going to toss this out so she'll want to go towards it.
Yes. See? Shadow. Yes. See? Shadow. Yes. See? Shadow. Yes. Good dog. Awesome. What you might notice is that I'm telling her to go see. So that's my cue to Shadow that she can go check something out. So I'm not trying to keep her from looking at it. I just wanted her to come away from it when I ask. Now, I'm going to go on to my next item. Okay, I'm not actually going on to the next item. You guys get the idea. So one of the things that comes up pretty frequently is that people say, yeah, but that's not real world. They know you're in training mode. And the answer to that is absolutely, they know you're in training mode. And it's not real world, but it helps your dog learn the skills so they can respond in the real world. And I'm going to tell you a quick little story here. This is how I train my dog. I train my dog mostly in the backyard at the park near our house, and a little bit out on hikes and at the beach. But we've done a lot of this, so we get a pretty strong conditioned response to our recall. We were out hiking once when we were on vacation, and we come around a corner, and there is quite a large wild boar popping its head out of some shrubs, and it sees my dog, and it takes off running full speed down into this meadow. So it's going down this hill into this meadow. My dog goes, whoa, this looks fun, and takes off after this wild boar. Mind you, we have never seen wild boar before. We've never trained for it. I've never trained my dog around wild animals very much at all. Just occasionally when we're hiking and stuff, and squirrels in the backyard. But we've done a lot of calling off of toys and balls and treats and all kinds of things in the backyard, her dog friends when they're playing. So at that moment, she takes off after this wild boar, and I yell at the top of my lungs because they're both going really fast, Shadow, come. And I was stunned, but she whipped around and totally ran back to me super fast. And she did that because of the reinforcement history that happened from doing this kind of training. There's no way I could ever have trained her around wild pigs, but I can train her in such a way that she has a conditioned response that will hold when there's wild pigs. And of course, when she got back to me, I whipped out my Chuck It, and we started playing a very exciting game of ball, which is her biggest reward of choice. And, next time we saw a pig, I was able to call her again. So it worked. There's one more exercise I wanted to show you. And this exercise is called Catch Me If You Can. And I'm bringing this one in at this point because whenever we're out off leash, at the beginning, I talked about that off leash skills are more than just about come with your dog. And I like to use this exercise because it teaches our dogs to follow us and pay attention to us as much as we pay attention to them. It's really a fun one. And the basic game is you do something to distract your dog, like putting a couple of pieces of kibble in the grass. While they're eating it, you dart off. When they go, whoa, where are you going? And they start to follow, you mark with your yes or your click. When they catch up, you can reward them and put a couple more pieces in the grass and take off again. The video shows me just going back and forth because I wanted to stay within camera range, but you can do this going in all different kinds of directions. So take a look.
Hi there. This exercise I'm going to show you today is called Catch Me If You Can. What you're going to need for this exercise are some really awesome treats in your treat pouch. And your dog, there's my dog, ready to go. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to drop some treats on the ground, let your dog eat them. And you're going to walk away as quickly as you can. When your dog catches up, you're going to mark with yes and drop some more treats and continue on in that way. So I'm going to see if I can show that to you here. So I'm just going to go back and forth since I'm trying to stay in view of the camera. But when you do this in real life, you might go all different directions all the way. You know, so maybe. Yes. 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 You're going to be doing your best to get away from your dog. Yes. Yes. Couldn't get away from her on that one. Okay, this is Catch Me If You Can. Great exercise to get your recall jump started.
Okay, guys, that's it for the exercises I wanted to show you. There's a lot more to do. Training a reliable recall takes usually you can jumpstart a recall. You can get your basic coming when called, you know, if you did a little bit every day within a couple of weeks. But to get a really reliable recall, depending on the dog, it can take anywhere from 5 to 6 months to even a year or two of systematic training. And depending what you need, you know, how reliable you need it to be. To get there, you're going to practice with lots and lots of easy distractions, so we get that reinforcement history. You're gradually going to build up those distractions and difficulty so that your dog thinks they're all easy. You've got to practice in lots of different locations. I usually tell people to aim for 10 to 15 locations. 2 or 3 of those can be at your house. 2 or 3 of them can be at your, you know, your park by your house, or down the street or whatever. 2 or 3 of them can be different places where you go to training class. But you want a few unique locations in there as well. We always want to go back to starting the good stuff with coming when called. So we always want to say, if you come to me, you get to go get what you want. It's called the Premax principle. There's a lot more details than that with it, but it's the basic idea is when you come, good stuff comes. You get what you want. Why all this practice? Just like when I was talking about with the wild pig, it didn't matter whether I had trained with that animal or not. And it didn't matter what reinforcement I had on my body in that moment. I wasn't showing my dog the ball and saying, hey, if you come, I'll throw the ball to you. I said, come, and she came, and then the ball came out. It's reinforcement history. What's happened up till that moment that is the key to success in the real world when we really, really, really need our dogs to come. Okay, a few final thoughts. Always return to who your dog is. Respect them. Know what your dog can and can't handle. Know what level of training you've done. Use really good common sense. I think that's it. So I'm looking forward to hearing questions. I hope you guys have some questions for me, and we can go from there. And I think.
Thank you so much, Marty. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. We've got some great questions, and wow, I love that personally for my training that I clearly need to do. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. You are amazing, Marty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's get started with some questions, and everyone, please ask away. I see some, but you know, Marty is here, and what a gift. So let's see, Marty, our first one. If a dog has good recall, but not totally excellent, I'm sorry, I can't see the question. Bear with me one sec. But not totally excellent, would it be good to do the exercise that is come super treat 10 times in low distraction environments? Or should this be done periodically as a reinforcer?
So yes, I would do that exercise if your dog has a reasonably, reasonably good at recall, but maybe it's not as quite as good as you want. And you can use the same word if your dog comes most of the time in most situations and only doesn't come in very specific situations. If your dog is kind of hit and miss in all situations, start with a new word. But if it's pretty good, yeah, you can just do that come treat, come treat. I refresh that with my dog about every 3 to 4 months. I just do it again, just to kind of give it another big punch.
Great, thank you. We do have a comment from Leslie who said, great presentation, thank you. And she especially likes the last slide.
Of course she does, because that's her dog right there.
Beautiful those eyes.
And it is, that photo was taken by the incomparable Sonia Gates. A great
Beautiful,
photo.
beautiful. Okay, this has been great. Thank you. And this is from Emily. I don't understand the concept of catch me if you can. What is the purpose of doing that game?
Okay, thanks for asking that. I think I kind of glossed over that a little because I knew this was getting a little too long, and I wanted to get to your guys' question. So the purpose of it is for your dog to learn to pay attention to you when you're moving away from them. So let's say you're out on a hike or you're at the beach and your dog stops to sniff something and you keep walking. And your dog looks up. We don't want them to look up and go, yeah, I can still kind of see you off there in the distance. So I don't really care. We want them to look up and go, hey, you're moving away. I want to catch up to you now. I want to stay with you. It means you have to call them less often when they learn to pay attention to you and stay with you, as well as you learning to respond when you ask them to stay with you. I hope that makes sense.
That's great. Yeah, I hope that makes sense too, that this is such good information to remember. Okay, we have, what if a dog is not very food motivated?
Okay, really good question. So first off, I'm gonna go into sort of a flip answer to start with. Forgive me for this, but all dogs are food motivated. If they didn't eat, they wouldn't be alive. None of us would, right? So we're all food motivated. So we have to look at, why does your dog not want food in that particular situation? And that comes down to, is your dog overstimulated? Because when an animal or person, when any of us are overexcited, our digestion shuts down a little bit, whether it's because we're afraid or whether it's because we're just whipped up because there's, something else going on. We don't want to eat. So are they overstimulated? Are they afraid? If your dog is in fight or flight mode, their body does not want food, they won't process it. Sometimes we look at things like, does your dog like the food you're trying to give them? Is your dog not have enough opportunity for off-leash activity? So when the leash does come off, they really don't care about food in that moment because they're more starved for activity than for food. But the other thing to look at is, assuming your dog is not afraid and they're not super overstimulated by the squirrels in the trees or whatever, and that you've done foundation training at home, and if your dog still is not interested in food, sometimes we look at other reinforcers. I have a dog like that. When I was first training her, she did not care one iota about food. Anytime we were outside of our kitchen, she would take a piece of kibble or a piece of chicken and spit it out to go about doing something else. And I had to do most of our training outside of the house. I did most of my training in the house and then switched when we got outside of the house to a toy as a reinforcer. So for my dog, that was the reinforcement. You can also use, you know, other things that your dog is into. Freedom is a great reinforcer. You come to me, I snap the leash off, you get to run free. But it is important that if your dog is having a hard time eating, that we start by looking at the whys, what's behind that. I hope
Great.
that answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Should we begin by using a long lead to do these exercises, especially when not in a fenced area?
Okay, super great question. So, perfect world, we would practice all of this stuff without any leash on at all. We'd start, say, in our house where there's no distractions, and then maybe go into the backyard where there's a little bit of distractions, but not that much, and then go into the front yard where maybe there's a little more distractions, and then go to a fenced park where there's nobody else around, and we practice, and then you get the idea, and you gradually make it into harder and harder environments. But if you don't have that opportunity, and I know a lot of people don't, maybe they live in an apartment, they don't have a yard, that kind of thing, then yes, you can use a long line to get it going. One thing I will say is that using long lines is a skill for safety. We have to be really careful. You always want to have a long leash on a harness, on a back clip harness, not on the front clip, but the kind of harness that clips on the back. So that if your dog runs and hits the end of that leash hard, that they are not getting injured. And we also have to be really careful that if your dog runs and hits the end of that leash hard, that you're not getting injured. So we do, you have to practice with it and do sort of think of it as a fishing line. You reel it in when the dog's close and you reel it out as the dog goes further away. So there's never very much slack. A little slack, but not a lot. And then yes, using a long line is a perfect thing to do. And over time, you can let the dog drag the line, and then you start clipping off the end of that line. Let's say you start with a 30-foot leash or 15-foot, and they've gotten really good, and they're coming when they're dragging it around. You can each week, when you go out to do your training, you can start making it a foot shorter every week until you get down to where there's no leash left and your dog is responding. If at any point they don't respond, then you go back to a longer line.
Okay, we have, what do you suggest for a correction in the following circumstance? Your dog has excellent recall off leash in all environments. However, she has a slip and delays in recall to sniff or play.
So I would look at that as not a situation to correct in the traditional sense of a correction. So in other words, I wouldn't tell the dog no or wrong. I would correct it by, usually it works to go close enough and then try again. So if your dog is 40 feet away and you call them and they're not able to come back to you in that moment, then I might go to where I'm 5 feet away and call them, and almost always they'll respond then. And so you're getting what you need at that point. But then I would make note of the situation, and I would be looking for how I can train systematically so that my dog can learn to respond in that situation. I found that you don't need to use corrections if your dog doesn't respond as much as you need to use reinforcement when they do respond, and that you have to do systematic training. And truthfully, it doesn't matter what training methods we use. Recall training has to be done systematically. So even if you're using a corrective-based training methodology, you still have to do it systematically. And if you do it systematically, you don't need to use corrections. I hope that makes sense.
Great. Okay, can you discuss the role genetics might play in recall?
Oh, yes. So there is different roles depending on what part of genetics we're talking about. So the thing that comes to mind right away for me when I think about that is what's called fixed action patterns or modal action patterns. So action patterns are something in a species that is genetically, I'm going to use very layperson terms with this. Please don't quote me to any of your scientist friends because it's going through my layperson filter. But basically, they're behaviors that are genetically programmed into our dogs, or other animals also have it, and including people. So for a predatory sequence is a really good example of that. So a dog is, there's movement, and the dog is triggered by that movement. So movement makes the dog chase. When that happens, that is an automatic response that comes from the environmental trigger. That's a really, they now know, it used to be thought that when an animal was in that fixed action pattern, that there couldn't be learning that could interrupt it. But now we know that there is learning that can happen that can interrupt that modal, which is why they're calling it a modal action pattern. Now they've changed the name of it in recent years. So that's one situation where you're going to have genetics playing a role. Another situation is you might have a really different response. I see a comment up here that I have a third husky, a third Malamute, and a third healer. So 1/3 of the time she comes back. And I'm sure that's referring to the husky and Malamute in there. When we have our herding breeds, our retrievers, our hunting breeds, all of these kinds of dogs were bred to work in conjunction with others. So they're much more likely to be responsive. They've got a little genetic programming in there for that responsiveness. There are other breeds that were bred to work more independently. I think a lot of the guardian breeds, I think of a Pyrenees out with the livestock. They're out there thinking for themselves how to be. And so they're going to be making their own decisions. However, that doesn't mean you can't teach them to come. You have to work with animals that are predisposed to be independent thinkers. We used to call it stubborn in dog training world, but truthfully, it's not. It's independent thinking. It's something that in the human world is highly valued. With independent thinkers, we have to be more creative and convince them that coming to us is in their best interest. And in a way, this is going to sound kind of funny, but is something that is their idea, I guess, is how I want to say that. So it's something that when we teach them to do it in a way that they go, okay, when I listen to you, it is in my best interest. I get what I need to out of this situation, which is really different than, you know, my little cattle dog border collie that's just like, yeah, I want to work with you all the time. And I totally recognize that. With animals like the huskies and the Malamutes, or other, a lot of the English setters, things like that, Irish setters, they seem to be harder to train genetically because their need for movement is so high. So if you have a husky that gets enough opportunity to run, training a recall is actually really quite easy with them. If they don't, then as I was saying earlier, it's really hard to teach a dog that's not having those basic needs met. And the basic need for a husky for running may be very, very different than the basic need for a toy poodle.
So interesting. Okay, so what should I do when my dog is running at the beach and can't hear my recall? Is there a whistle or an e-collar? He's usually good when he can hear. And thank you, enjoyed the presentation.
Okay, that's a really good question. Yeah, you can use a whistle. You can whistle train your dog the same way that we were talking about voice training in this presentation. And there's a lot of good success with that. I think that if your dog is going far enough away, however, that they can't hear you, a better approach might be to teach them what we would call boundary training. In other words, stay within a 30 or a 40-foot radius of us, and that way they can hear you. So you teach them not to go farther away than a certain amount of distance. That's a whole different training process. So I won't go into details on that, but I would think about it that way. You could try the whistle and see if you get enough volume. And I know on windy days, especially, it can be really hard for our dogs to hear us at the beach. So that's a great question.
Thank you. Okay, I want to be sure, Marty, I think you see this, but there's a really sweet hello from Katie who says, hi, Marty, thanks for the presentation. And hi from Cole, the excitable black lab mix from your puppy class 8 years ago.
Oh, I remember, Cole. Thank you, Katie.
So sweet. Okay, and we have a final question. What is your opinion of retractable leashes?
Okay, great question. Actually, all these questions are great questions. Retractable leashes have a lot of downside. And the downside of retractable leashes is that they can be unsafe. You know, those little thin cords can wrap around fingers and feet and things like that, and then they pull tight and they can cause cuts. They also, if a dog starts running and the leash comes loose, they can hit the end really hard. I had a friend who got pulled off her feet when her dog was on a retractable leash. I've had my own dog pull the leash out of my hand. So I just want to start with that caveat that retractable leashes have, like a long line, have a safety issue that we have to be very cognizant of. That doesn't mean you can't use them. I would not use retractable leashes at all around other dogs. I think that if you're working on your dog calling away from other dogs, it can be very dangerous for the dogs that can get tangled and hurt. However, if you have a dog that you want to walk, say, on a trail or something, and they are not yet fully recall trained, you don't want them off leash, but you want to give them a little more space than your 6-foot lead. A retractable lead might be a way to go. My previous dog, I used a retractable leash with, and I know most dog trainers say don't ever use them, but she was a dog that spooked at things, and if she was frightened, she ran. So I didn't want her fully off leash because you never knew when there was going to be a loud noise or something else that was going to scare her. And so we did use a flexi lead to give her as much freedom of movement as possible when we were in very safe areas to use it. So that was a good question.
Okay, well, I think we've covered all of the questions that were asked. And again, Marty, thank you so much. This was unbelievably helpful, and I hope all of you enjoyed it, and we're grateful to all of you for attending and being part of this. We will make the recording available, and it will go out within the week. And feel free to share it, and
Hey,
please sign
Michelle.
up for information from BirchBark. We'd love to stay in touch with you and share what we're doing. And definitely, we hope you'll save the date for our upcoming gala. It'll be a very special night. And thank you all so much. Stay safe, stay
Hey,
happy.
Michelle.
Yes.
Hey, I see a couple of other questions. So what I want to
okay,
just
sure.
say
Yeah.
is that if you want to leave, go for it. I'll go ahead and answer these couple other questions that I think maybe came in a little later.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So I won't be offended if you click out now, because I know we've been going a long time. So one of them is I have a 4-month-old Australian cattle dog, and it's been a long time since I've had a puppy. Wondering if there's an age when you think recall may be better. This puppy is social, etc., making him a little more difficult to recall when he sees another person. So a 4-month-old puppy, I would start recall training with a 4-month-old puppy. You're going to get some recall at that age, and then it's all going to fall apart at about 6 months when they start to go into adolescence, and you're going to have to retrain it. But it's always good to have as much as you can with the youngsters. And a 4-month-old puppy, you mentioned that they really want to go up when they see another person, which is awesome. 4-month-old puppies should be highly social. They should really care about that social interaction at that age. And it's really neat to be able to see that your dog is social. And that's the kind of situation where I would just say, it's really not realistic for my puppy to have a great recall at 4 months. So I'm going to work with them, but know that, it's going to not be till they're in maturity before they can really think well enough to have a solid recall. The other one has been on a dog that has been living off leash outside without fences for a year and clearly has her own agenda. What are the chances for calling her back? P.S. She's a Husky Malamute healer. So that's a really good question. And it is possible. It's going to be a little bit more of an uphill battle than if you're starting with a dog that hasn't had that experience, possibly. Sometimes when you've got dogs that have been outside living on their own, they're actually really happy to learn to recall. They're happy to have us sort of take charge of their safety. But they do need a lot of experience before they learn that. So it depends a lot on the dog is what I would say there. But I think it is possible, depending on who the dog is and their experiences. I think it's not probable immediately. It would take a little bit of sort of helping the dog learn to think differently. That, I think, is all I see.
Yeah, thank you for catching that, Mardi.
Yeah.
Great questions.
Okay, I think that might be it. If there's any that were missed, you can always go to my website. My email is all over my website. Pop me an email and I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Mardi.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been really great. Thanks for everybody for all your awesome questions too.
Have a great night, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.